Welcome back and thanks for staying with us here on Breakfast Central. The federal government has come out strongly to refute claims that it has secretly altered existing tax laws. This comes amid growing public concern and speculation that new fiscal policies are being implemented without the legislative process or stakeholder engagement.
The Minister of Finance, in a statement released yesterday, described the allegations as misleading and dangerous, warning that continued misinformation and delays in implementing the 2025 finance bill could have devastating consequences for the economy. Joining us this morning is a business analyst, Mr. Wale Ajayi. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Ajayi.
Good morning. Thank
you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Since the member of the House of Representatives, representing Sokoto, Abdul Samad Dasuki, raised this issue at the floor of the House about the discrepancy in the gazetted law and what was discussed and what was approved by Parliament, we didn't hear anything. It took almost a week, if I'm not mistaken, for Mr. Taiwo to grant an interview and explain the side of the government. And now they've come out to completely deny this. What do you make of this issue and the government's response so far?
I don't even know what to say. I mean, this is the first time we're having this kind of controversy. And I think if you look at what has happened, I think it started from the time when National Assembly transmitted this bill to the presidency. The way it works is that it goes from the National Assembly to the presidency, then it goes from the presidency to the Minister of Justice just to review and ensure that all references are correct. I think in between something happened. Now, we don't know what happened. Now, ordinarily, when the National Assembly passes a bill, there's supposed to be a tracker, a portal, an online portal, where you can actually see all the bills that have been passed and sent to the president for assent. Now, just before I came into this studio, I checked that online portal. And you will not believe it. The last item on that portal was at June 2024. So there is no reference to this. So we don't even know what was transmitted to the nationals and to the presidency. So it's difficult, to speculate and to talk about it. All is about speculation. I do have a couple of the first gazette that was released, and then there was what they call official gazette. But really and truly, when you have a gazette, it's official. Yeah. So we don't really know what is happening. So that's the controversy. Nobody can say with certainty whether what was transmitted, it's exactly what the president has assented to, right? But I know the National Assembly has come out with a set up a committee to look at this. And so we're just hopeful.
Beyond mere statements from the taxman, Mr. Olede, what level of, what would you have expected to assuage the fears of Nigeria and show intentional transparency on his part? Do you think he should have gone ahead to release both documents so that Nigerians can compare and make up their minds? Because as it is now, we're only taking his words for his words against the House of Representatives.
Interestingly, this has nothing to do with the Presidential Committee at all. Now, when they did their work, they passed it on to the executive. It became an executive bill. That bill was transmitted to National Assembly. So what we're looking at now, what we're seeing is the issue between National Assembly and the presidency. He doesn't even have a clue. Well, he may probably have a copy of what was transmitted, but it has nothing to do with the Presidential Committee, so you cannot hold him culpable, right? The issue we have is between the National Assembly and the presidency. All he also is doing is speculating as to what could have transferred, because what he passed, what he sent to the president was a bit different from the harmonized bill that I saw. Now, I can't even tell you whether that harmonized bill is the real thing, because the National Assembly never uploaded the transmitted bill onto their portal. So it's difficult to speculate, but it has nothing to do with the Presidential Committee. Okay. So we can't say there's a lack of transparency.
All right. We, of course, want to share with you a clip, an excerpt of the interview that he had, speaking about these tax bills, the alleged discrepancies, and what the position of the government is. Let's take a look.
I think that this is a legislative versus executive conversation. I do not think that's what it is. I think it's a process and a system issue that has to be addressed. And I don't think it's about finger pointing and looking for who to blame. Like what I said is, if you think about the process today, there's a lot of stages with manual hands-offs that anything can go wrong. So when you sit to discuss changes to the law as lawmakers, there's someone who is making notes who needs to go and update. You need to ensure that they're updating what they have been asked to. You finish that with House of Rep, you do almost the same thing for Senate, and then you harmonize, and then you also need people to update. And then you certify it, you send it, usually through the Ministry of Justice to go to Mr. President for assent. And once it's been signed, you will notice that the version that the President signs is a different format. You have to then put it in their gazetting format, which is also done, manually. And then that's sending from the President after assent for gazetting goes to Ministry of Information. Now, these different stages do not have the level of quality assurance that can make sure that these things never happen, not only for the tax bills, but for going forward. So which is why my preference is maybe we shouldn't waste this crisis, if you call it a crisis, and use it as an opportunity not only to identify if anything had gone wrong in this case that is substantial, address them, but more importantly, to strengthen that process going forward, so that when we have laws, we know that these laws have not been tampered with in any way, form, or shape. And by the way, you said when the laws were being signed, and I've heard this also, the Senate President was there, the Speaker was there, but if you are there when they're signing the law, you can't read 400 pages just because you're there. There's a process for finding out, the content of that. So I wouldn't say just the fact that the law...
You've heard what he said. Let's get your reaction.
Okay. What I would say is that is right in terms of the process. And, this is not really the time for finger pointing, but we need to address the issue. But for me, the only part of it that I do not agree with is that this is at the core of the act in itself, right? When there are allegations that what the president signed wasn't what the National Assembly enacted or transmitted to him, you have a problem. You have a bigger problem. If you do not correct it now, it's not about speed, about haste. Right? If you do not correct it now, it actually strikes at the heart of the bill, because anybody can actually go to court. And if they prove that the president signed the wrong one, then that act becomes null and void. So my take, I won't say because we want to enact the Tax Reform Act and for it to become effective from 1st January, that we should gloss over. It goes beyond just errors or altering. It's at the heart of the legislative process in itself. And I think what needs to happen is that those acts, if they're proven to be true, that the bills or the acts were altered, they have to be reenacted by the National Assembly. So I won't say...
But that will take time.
Well, in this kind of situation, it's not a question of speed. Speed kills. And we've got to be very careful. It's about equity, it's about fairness, it's about what is legal, right? Because if something doesn't have a foundation to stand on, then it's going to fall.
Well, so he's suggesting that, let's go ahead with it first. And then we would fix the system.
I understand what he's saying.
Yes.
So, for example, when we had the petroleum industry bill, right, there were some provisions in the bill that were not perfect. But you don't allow imperfection, to be the enemy of the good, right? You can go on. But just go beyond just provisions. We're talking about, legality, whether the act themselves have the basis for us to be able to implement them. So if you're talking about just, trying to make some provisions or some slight errors, this goes beyond errors.
It's beyond clerical errors.
Beyond clerical errors. And so we need to address the issue. If we don't address yes, I understand, with the image it's going to send to the investors, investing public, but at the end of the day, we need to get this right. And if we do, right, we'll be the better for it.
We have time. The holiday starts.
It's not a question of time. It's January 1st. It's not sacrosanct. It's not cast in anything. We can always postpone it. This is not the first time. We had the Finance Act in 2022. It didn't come into being on 2023. So it doesn't, there is not a question of haste, right? It's not a question of speed. I think what we need to do is that we want to get it right and have the bill or act that people can have faith in or trust in. That is the question here.
I put out a tweet like 2 weeks ago. I said I had a funny feeling that they would postpone the tax reforms before this happened. So I'm going to say maybe I'm a soothsayer in some way. But my question is, I'm worried about, just like Mr. Tao Yedili said, it could go on.
Yes.
You've highlighted why it shouldn't go on. But being an economist and one who possibly would have a thought of why take it to France, what happens to the KPMGs? What happens to the Ernst & Young? What happened to all of these companies that are here? You as an economist, are you also worried that they had to take this entire tax reform thing to France? Why not leave it at home?
Well, I don't know. I haven't heard the story about France, so
Okay.
But I think the issue is not. This is not the first time we are enacting any law in Nigeria. We've done it before, even though there have been allegations in some quarters that there are some of the acts that we have where the executive had made some insertions that were not passed by the National Assembly. But I think we can get it right. It's a process thing. But by and large, all the things that we've done, we've never had this kind of controversy, right? In that, this is a big issue for us, right? We're talking about trying to transform the entire tax administration in Nigeria.
And consulting is taken to France. Is that okay with you?
No, it's not. I mean, you can. We have local content. It has to be done.
That's
we have
what
the
I'm saying.
expertise. We have the skill. We have the knowledge. We even advise some foreign governments on how they should run the administration.
Signing an MOU.
But there's an MOU that's been signed with France on the same tax
Yeah, I know
reform.
about the MOU that was signed with the federal government. I mean, it's just about. I'm not sure about the content of the MOU in itself.
So
but it's about. I think it's more about capacity, building
So
and strengthening the tax administration policy in Nigeria.
I'm happy that you're here, and my happiness
Yeah.
is the fact that you are one who is involved fully when it comes to all of this economic. Are you not also worried that it had to be taken outside the shores of the country? Are we saying that Nigerian companies, like I mentioned a few names, don't have capacity?
Well, of course we do have the capacity. We have the knowledge, we have the expertise, we have the capability. I really don't know what people are thinking. And I think, when things like this happen, people start to speculate and start saying, maybe we should do it outside of Nigeria. But when it comes to even printing our currency, there have been speculations where people are saying, maybe we should do it because of security, right? So I don't, that has no foundation. We have the expertise, we have the capability and the capacity to get things done here. We advise foreign government on how to run their own tax administration. So there is no way where we can't do this. We have the skill, we have the experience, so there is no basis for that at all.
All right. Now, going back to what we had said earlier regarding the alleged discrepancies between what was presented to the president, what was presented to the National Assembly and what was gazetted. Tawe Edele has said there are no discrepancies, it's a fake document in circulation. And I know that there is a breach of trust between our citizens, our government, and when I say government, I'm talking about the various arms of the government, not just the executive arm as well. So what can be done now to guarantee that clarity? And on whose table does the responsibility lie to ensure that clarity is given to Nigerians? Because we can't independently verify now. We don't have access to these documents.
I think Taiwo himself is speculating, right? I think from what I've seen, just that you can't say they are the correct documents or the valid document because there's so many versions that circulated they are signed by the president. Even when the president signed it, there was one that was called the Gazette. And then there was another one that was called the Official Gazette. The fact of the matter is that once the president has signed and it's printed, it's Gazette, it's become official, right? So he also recognized that there were errors, right? And there were glaring some insertions that were not made based on what he himself, might have, because he probably sat in some of the proceedings in the National Assembly. So those issues are there. But I think what he's trying to do is that because so much work has gone through this effort, this is the first time we're consolidating all our tax act. This is noble. This is a big issue for us. Because you can imagine when we have several laws and you need to be making references to 5, 6, 7 laws, but now you only need to look at one law, right? Because the bulk of what is done is just a consolidation. There are 1 or 2, changes that are made, but the major issue is the consolidation. So what I think, and I agree with him in terms of the process. Process needs to be, we need to get the process right. I really can't say what happened, and nobody can say until we get the findings from the National Assembly and officially release to the public that this is what happened. They are the only ones that can say, categorically, that what they transmitted to the president is different from what was gazetted. Any other thing is speculation, all right? Because, like I said, I mean, I've seen some versions that the National Assembly have passed, and we're there also. But you can't really tell, all right? It all depends on what they sent and what the president signed. So what we need to do is that we need to carry out and complete this investigation. We need to know where we got it wrong, so that we can strengthen the process, so that it will not happen again. If we don't deal with this, I bet you it's going to recur. And we come back and start talking about the same thing.
And the concern as well is that oftentimes, as with many other issues in Nigeria, we raise a lot of dust, a lot of noise about it, and after a while it goes silent and things go back to business as usual. Do you foresee that happening?
I don't think this is going to happen in this case. I don't think. As it is now, you know, the president has set up a committee on implementation.
But this is not the first time we're seeing committees. I mean,
yeah, you know, Nigeria is a
committee. Committee of mission.
Well, you know, Nigeria is all about, the problem in Nigeria is not because we don't have ideas. The problem has always been how to implement the ideas that we have, right? So for this issue, because of the dust it has generated, I don't see how it's going to become business as usual. I think it's in the best interest of the government, it's in the best interest of the Presidential Committee, and it's in the best interest of the National Assembly to ensure that these issues are addressed. Because what you're talking about here is the supremacy of the National Assembly. No other body has the power to make laws or to change what the National Assembly has sent to the President. So that is why it is in their best interest to ensure that we identify what went wrong, and we can then propose what we need to do to strengthen the process so that it doesn't recur again. So the answer to your question is I don't foresee a situation where this will be business as usual. We will resolve this problem.
All right. Okay. I mean, it's quite the suggestion you've talked about, us putting it on pause, ensuring that there's an adequate investigation. And I guess the next few days will reveal what the next step will be.
And just before we wrap up, I mean, this has to do with people's hard-earned monies. What message should the federal government be passing to Nigerians now, ordinary Nigerians? Because in the past, we've seen people that have been very reluctant to pay taxes. They say, oh, what do I get from government?
Yeah.
I'm my own minister of power, I provide my security and things like that. And the government has really spent time trying to preach the gospel of this new tax laws that is going to help stimulate the economy. It's going to do a lot of great positive things for Nigerians. And now we have this trust issue. So after, I know we're waiting for the House of Representatives Committee report to come out. In the interim, what can they do to, assuage the fears of ordinary Nigerians?
We still have the current law. The current law has not been repealed, okay, until the tax law becomes effective. I think I do understand the pain. I mean, there are certain provisions in this law that will help to reduce the burden of low-income earners. So I do get that. I understand that, right? But we still need to get it right. That's my philosophy. We need to get it right. If we waited this while and everyone has not fallen, I don't think 2 months or 1 month will make a difference. Yeah. We need to get it right. This is at the heart. Once you have lost trust or faith in the heart, then that's the end of it. You cannot afford to go that pathway at all.
Anyway, as we wrap up again, I'd like to get your thoughts on the overlapping in terms of the current government. We've seen a rollover of the capital spending. 2023, 2024, like you said, started 2024, now going into 2025, 25 now going into 2026. And it's been a subject of conversation. People are saying this is the first time when Nigeria is engaged in this. What impact will this have on the economy, especially letting Nigerians know that 2026 is going to be something different?
Well, I don't think it's going to be different. Like you said, this is not the first time it's happening. Our budget performance has never gone beyond 60%, 65, 70% every year. There's so many issues. Of course, the release of funds, right? At times, I don't know whether it is deliberate, delay in releasing funds. And for me, I'm not really bothered about capital expenditure. Okay. Really, it's more of infrastructure. I think the problem that people need to know here in Nigeria is that what do we spend money on? It's something that will enable us to grow the economy in Nigeria. When you spend money on buying cars, that's capital. When you spend money on expanding buildings, that's capital. But that will not do us much good. We should be spending money on infrastructure like roads, like health, like school, like telecommunication. Now, if you look at the 2026 budget, for example, we've allocated 26 trillion to capital expenditure. Guess how much has been allocated to infrastructure? 4 trillion. 4 trillion. So we're not going anywhere. So the issue of delay in capital expenditure, I'm not worried about it. It's been a pattern, right? But we can do better. The coordination between Ministry of Finance and Budget Office, it can be better. But 2026, I don't see any difference. We'll come into 2027, right? And we'll say budget performance is about 60 or 65 or 70%. It cannot be higher than that. It's just the way things are. And by the way, also, it's not only Nigeria. Even if you go to some other countries, we also have a similar problem. But of course, Nigeria is unique in the sense that it's been a pattern, it's been a trend.
I think the concern is, if we're saying that our budget performance is not at an optimum level, and then we're looking at the expenditure, it's not making sense, right? It feels like there is. So, for example, there was an estimate of 40 trillion. We were able to get only 10 trillion, 30 trillion, and then we're seeing the average regular Nigerian, they're seeing some expenses on certain things that do not make sense. They're looking at the budget and seeing a mere repetition. And then you're talking of a report that should be delivered quarterly. It's December. We've not heard anything, even though there is a law that says that this should be done. So
I think the way to look at it is that when you say it doesn't make any sense in terms of the expenditure, you need to look at the components of the budget. Where do we spend money on in Nigeria budget? We spend money on personnel cost. We spend money on debt, paying debt, right? Debt. By the time you look at debt and personnel, now in the revenue figure for this 2026 budget, it's about 34. Last year, in 2025, we have 41. We're expecting 41 trillion in revenue. But this year, 34 trillion. Now, of course, there's so many reasons. BAT, government reallocated, is reallocating 5% of their own revenue to the state and federal. So that could be one of the reasons. And of course, the revenue from oil. Nigeria is still a monocultural economy. We depend on oil. In 2025, we expected that we'll be producing about 2.1 million barrels of oil per day at an average of $75. Oil price in 2025 was about 60, and we're not doing more than 1.5, 1.7. So this year, government realized that fully, and they've reduced the price to about 65. Even that 65, from what analysts are saying,
it's too ambitious.
Yes, ambitious. Price is not expected to be more than $60. And we say we produce 1.8. We're producing about 1.6 now. Yeah. So government has acknowledged that. So we don't have a revenue. So we have a revenue challenge.
Yes.
But expenditure, what can government do with expenditure? Personnel, they must pay salaries.
True.
Debts, all the debts that we've acquired, we must settle the debts. And what has happened with the debt is that, when we did the rebasing of the economy, what that means is that the denominator, became very big. Our debt is about $100 billion. So it reduces the debt to GDP ratio. Now, we then have the capacity to get more debt, right? And so we have to get debt to finance debt and to pay salaries.
Trapping ourselves in a cycle of debt by doing that?
Okay. Well, what people tend to look at is that there are ratios that you look at. Debt to GDP ratio in Nigeria is actually about 50%. You get to some developed countries, it's close to about 90%, more than 100%. I think the issue is not about borrowing. The issue is what do you do with the debt? If you use the debt for infrastructure, right, not for buying cars, buying planes and all those kind of stuff, then you will be good. But what are we using the debt for? So that's the real issue.
That's the most that we can take in the conversation this morning. Thank you for sharing
Thank you so much, Mr. Ajayi.
Expert opinion with us this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Ajayi.
Thank you so much.